All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NCORE Spotlight on Resilience webinar. We'll be talking about grant opportunities today. We've brought together a lot of folks from around the state, different programs to talk to you about the grant opportunities. I don't expect them to have their checkbooks with them right at this moment, but looking forward to hearing a lot from them, and you'll be able to ask questions. As you can see, your mics should all be muted. Please check to ensure that they are muted. Then when we get to the Q&A part, after all the presenters have shared their information, we're going to ask you to come off and speak, raise your hand, indicate that you want to speak, and we'll acknowledge you. Or if you're not willing to do that, please put your questions in the chat, and we will try to answer them as they come up. Before we get into the presentations, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Amanda Martin. She's the Chief Resilience Officer for NCORE for the state of North Carolina, and she's going to share a few remarks with you. Amanda.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for that introduction, and thank you everybody who's joined us here today. We know that y'all are here because you, like us, care a lot about long-term resiliency in our communities in North Carolina. I'll take a moment to introduce our office. So we work at NCORE, which stands for the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. We are a division within the Department of Public Safety. And NCORE's mission is to help the state recover stronger, smarter and stronger. So that's our overall mission. And then the piece of the resiliency team specifically is to think about long-term resilience to hazards and climate disasters. And so we're here today to talk about money. And that's always a good way to kick off a webinar series because everyone cares about money. Money is a requirement of moving forward on a lot of resilience work. I just want to take one moment to say it is not the only requirement. I think we find that when funding is very scarce, it feels like money is just the one thing that's in the way. That means we can't take action because there's no funding available. And then sometimes in more funding-rich environments, we find out that actually there are other things that we need in order to be successful with resilience. We need leadership, especially local leadership, to champion our projects. We need an overall strategy so that we make sure when we're implementing individual projects that they make sense all together. And of course, we need engineering and science to help make sure that we are putting together the best possible projects that will really, truly serve our communities. But today we are talking about money, and actually we'll be talking about money at the next one as well. We have some funders who have recurring funding sources that are pretty much guaranteed to become available each year. We have other funders that don't have that kind of luxury of knowing that their program will be renewed. And I think you'll find some similarities, even though those are different kinds of programs. And really what we want to see is that your community is prepared to put forth the best project for your community. What we don't want to see is when funding becomes available, all of a sudden everyone throws spaghetti at the wall and see what fits, and there has to be something we can do with those funds in our community. We want y'all to have the best projects or projects that you've already been thinking about that are really lined up to serve your community, that have support from your leadership, so that you can go in and get the money that works for you instead of trying to make, the funding opportunity fit something that could go in your community. So with that, thank you to all of the presenters who are here today, and thank you to our audience, all of our participants. Please reach out at any time after the webinar if you have questions. We want to be generally available to folks in the state to talk about these kinds of things. So thank you, and I'll pass it back to Brian.
Thank you, Amanda. We'll be moving on to the presentations. I'm going to give you a sort of a quick overview, and then we're going to ask the speakers to queue up and be ready to go. Let me share my screen with you. And here are our presenters for today. From the Golden Leaf Foundation, we'll have Casey Ginsberg, and she'll be supported by Bryn Fan and Celia Thiel. And then we'll have Amin Davis from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, and Kane Riggin from the North Carolina Emergency Management. I think we call him Mr. Brick. He'll share about that information for you. And then Travis Klondike from the North Carolina, I keep it's hard for me to say NC State, but we have to admit that they're an important part of the part of building our economy here in North Carolina. He's from the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab, and you will see some of the fabulous work that they have done. I am Brian Byfield. I am the Resilient Communities Program Manager, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'll be fielding questions, and like we said, questions will be held until after all the presenters have gone through. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask Casey to put up her presentation while we talk a little bit about the Golden Leaf Foundation. So the Golden Leaf Foundation Disaster Recovery Mitigation Program projects are managed by Celia Thiel and Bryn Farr. Casey serves as the Vice President and Chief of Staff for Golden Leaf and leads state appropriated programs, including disaster recovery and flood mitigation. Casey, all yours. You can get your presentation up. You're free to go.
Awesome. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm sorry, I'm not super great at WebEx. And thank you all for, sorry, I've taken the screen down evidently. Well, thank you all for the great introduction, for being here today. I know it's always work to figure out how to access resources to do more of the important work that is going on in your community. So thank you all for taking time. As Brian introduced my team, Celia and Bryn are with me today, and they are the program officers for the disaster recovery and flood mitigation grant programs. They're typically an applicant's first point of contact, and the person that shepherds an application through a process. So if you've been a Golden Leaf grantee or an applicant, then chances are you have met with Bryn and Celia. So those who are not familiar with the Golden Leaf Foundation, we are a North Carolina foundation that was established in 1999 after the master settlement agreement with the cigarette manufacturer. So LEAF is intentionally an acronym. It's a reference to tobacco, but LEAF also stands for Long-Term Economic Advancement Foundation. And our mission is to increase economic opportunity in rural and tobacco-dependent and economically distressed communities throughout North Carolina. We've been around again since 1999. It's our 25th year. I've been at the foundation since January 2017, joining shortly after Hurricane Matthew. So Golden Leaf primarily focuses on job creation, economic investment, workforce preparedness, and agriculture. Each priority area that we focus on has specific outcomes that we expect to gather from funded projects. And a typical project for us can look like extension of public infrastructure to support industrial development, purchasing equipment for a community college to conduct training, or applied research in the agricultural field. And so although I've mentioned flood mitigation and disaster recovery, those are not core Golden Leaf programs. We do have an open door policy, and we allow folks to meet with our teams, and we do regularly, to talk about projects. But I'd say where we have done our most work in flood mitigation, disaster recovery has been when the General Assembly appropriates funds to Golden Leaf for certain programs. Golden Leaf is a public foundation. Our board is appointed by the governor, the general speaker of the House, president pro tem of the Senate. We're subject to public meetings and open records. And so from time to time, the General Assembly will appropriate funds to Golden Leaf to administer similar to a state agency. But the idea being that we've got a little bit more flexibility. So when urgency is a priority, our board can act more quickly than an agency going through rulemaking. We also have really a focus in working in rural communities. And so after the major disasters where a lot of the communities that were impacted were in Eastern North Carolina, they were really aligned with communities that we have really deep engagement in. And so that's why from time to time, the General Assembly will appropriate funds to us for these specific programs. So we have essentially modified our regular golden leaf processes to accommodate, and we develop special outcomes for these projects. Typically, we're looking for benefiting units of households, businesses, public and private entities like churches, schools, things like that. But we do, these programs are subject to the same level of review as all golden leaf projects, in addition that we collect outcomes to provide and reporting to the state. So we don't currently have any programs open right now, so I'll get that part out of the way. But what the NCORE team asked us to do was share a little bit about the things we do look for, and then we'll talk a little bit about what next steps could look like with golden leaf. And so these characteristics of competitive projects were what was adopted by our board for the flood mitigation grant program. So whenever the General Assembly appropriates funds to us, they give a lot of latitude to our board in really assessing how projects will be evaluated. And so this was the characteristics that we came up with in conjunction with our board on how we would essentially identify which projects would receive funding, knowing that we'll receive more applications and we'll have funds available. So the first is efforts to mitigate against hazards with a frequency beyond a hurricane or other named storm. We recognize that a lot of flood mitigation solutions, we could try to solve the 100,000-year flood, or we could try to stop the frequent flooding. Our board wanted to stop the frequent flooding. So if we're looking at a frequency, is this happen more often than a hurricane or other named storm in those big frog stranglers or other kind of major unnamed storms? As I mentioned before, we look for a clear benefit for residents, business, or other entities. We want to make sure that where flooding poses a risk for life, health, and safety is prioritized. We look for a demonstrated likelihood of success and feasibility, typically with some sort of engineering or analysis by a professional engineer. I like to joke that, I was a liberal arts major, I was a political science major in college, so we are not equipped to evaluate your projects. We'll rely on NCORE and other experts to help give us feedback if we've got a question, but we're typically relying on a community to have developed that feasibility assessment. We look for current estimates of probable costs, so conducting an estimate of probable cost for a project and then requesting funding 3 years later, those prices are going to have changed. We do like to see that that's linked to a comprehensive assessment or planning effort within a community, that this is a community-driven solution, that there's been some vetting process within the community to identify this particular neighborhood or this particular area as a priority compared to other similar projects in a locality. Next is sustainable outcomes. So we don't typically fund things like debris removal or ditch clearing because the ditches get filled back up. And that's not really sustainable if you're constantly looking for money to clean the ditches. So we typically look at installation of new infrastructure or improvements of infrastructure that can help with sustainability and be regularly maintained by local government. And then finally, leveraging. We love to see leverage of non-golden leaf funds. So local funds, other funds from other grant sources. And then certainly in times of disaster, we're heavily focused on not displacing available FEMA public assistance or insurance. Characteristics of lower priority projects. So things like prevention of flooding that has not yet occurred, general projects for climate resilience, or other improvements that are not associated with direct impacts from flooding have tended to be a lower priority for our board. That's not to say it's not important. It's not to say it's not, not to say we don't understand how critical it is to the overall ecosystem. It's just that where our board has felt most comfortable has been in those areas that I mentioned before as characteristics of the competitive projects. And so really the best ways to stay in touch with us about open opportunities is to subscribe to our newsletter. Whenever the General Assembly appropriates funds to us for a specific program, we will do a round of outreach. We work with the League of Municipalities, the County Commissioners Association, NCORE, others to help get the word out through the communities. But we'll always send out information on our newsletter. We'll have it on our website. We do want to make sure that the word gets out. We keep an email list of folks that regularly been in touch with us that we'll send it out to. because at the end of the day, it's a bad outcome for us if there are projects that weren't aware of our funding opportunity. When applying, we always post a pretty detailed guidelines document. The flood mitigation guidelines is actually still up, and it includes instructions on our website about, and our application portal, about what specifically we're looking for with these questions, the information we're requesting. And as a best practice for any grant, honestly, is read the guidelines, make sure you're following the instructions. Funders are different, they look for different information. And so it's not going to be one size fits all for funding opportunities. Your application for DEQ may not be exactly what Golden Leaf is looking for, and vice versa. And as I mentioned, Golden Leaf has a preference for construction over planning in most of our programs. However, in some of our state appropriated programs, we have funded planning where there has been construction funding available. We're helping to fill a gap. And so that is, again, where our funds typically are. I'll just leave it here on our website, goldenleaf.org. You can navigate to all of our available funding programs, including the flood mitigation program. We also have a grant search available where you can search prior funded projects. Really, all information that you want is going to be on our website. And with that, I will turn it back to Brian.
Thank you very much, Casey. Casey has brought a team with her. Bryn and Celia are here, so don't hesitate to get your questions in. Again, questions will be done at the end of all presentations. Please jot them down or put them in the chat, and we will get to them. But she certainly has a team that can answer most of your questions, if not all, at this time. Next, we are going to go to Amin Davis from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. So, Amin, you can put up your slides at this moment. Amin is an environmental scientist with nearly 25 years of professional experience conducting environmental assessment, water resource management, and watershed improvement activities. He has been employed at DEQ since 2008 and has been the grant manager of water resources since 2016. Prior to his employment with the state, he worked in the private sector with several engineering firms in the Triangle area and served as a volunteer on several community nonprofit organizations. I know Amin fairly well, and I am sure he's going to provide a lot of relevant and vibrant information for you to access the funding opportunities through his program and the wider DEQ. Amin, all yours.
Thanks a lot, Brian, for the introduction. First of all, can you hear me? And second of all, can you see my slides? Great. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank NCORE for inviting me to speak to you all, and also for them coordinating this important webinar. Again, my name is Amin Davis. I've been with DEQ since 2008 and have been the grant manager with DWR's Water Resource Development Grants since 2016. Let's see. Okay, so these are, here's the information I plan to share with you during the next 15 minutes. And look forward also to the Q&A and discussion afterwards. So the Water Resources Development Grant Program is divided into two primary sections. I'm first going to briefly cover the coastal infrastructure side of our program that my coworker Kevin Hart manages. But I'm primarily here to tell you about the state and local projects which I manage. These are the three kind of project areas under coastal infrastructure. And some of these projects are considered resiliency and ecosystem restoration projects. So they're projects that fund stream restoration, stormwater control measures, and dune restoration. However, most of these funds go towards dredging coastal navigation channels and beach nourishment projects. So if any of you want to learn more about coastal infrastructure projects, Kevin's contact information will be on the last slide with mine. All right, so now I'm going to get into the portion that I manage called state and local projects. So I'll first talk about our state and local projects are grouped into state and local on the left and NRCS Equip on the right. NRCS Equip stands for Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Equip stands for Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So I want to highlight on the left generally the 4 types of projects that we provide funding for, which are stream restoration, water management, water-based recreation, and we also provide funding for engineering and feasibility studies to implement one of these 3 types of projects. We require a 50% cost share funding of non-federal costs, which means if a project were $100,000, we could provide up to $50,000 of funding, and the applicant would be required to come up with the other 50%. Our awards are generally capped at $200,000, although we do offer larger awards that are made on a case-by-case basis for a project that essentially would included all 3 project types that are listed above. The NRCS Equip projects are essentially stream restoration projects in Western North Carolina that are cost shared through the federal Equip program. It also is a 50% cost share funding of the non-federal cost. Those awards are not currently capped. And for both state and local and Equip, we have 2 application cycles, which is probably a little atypical of most grant programs. And we'll talk more about those grant cycles in an upcoming slide. So I just want to highlight the 4 eligible project types that we fund. The yellow highlighted text basically shows the most common type of project under each of these 4 categories. And there are photos on the right that correspond to the different categories that you can see. And then at the end of this, I'm actually going to take you on a little tour of some pictures and highlight some of these featured projects. Our most popular project is probably actually the Casci River Treehouse in the town of Windsor in Bertie County. So some of you, if you haven't been or had a opportunity to check that out, it's a really neat space right on the Casci River. So as far as our application process, I've kind of tried to consolidate this and make this simple. Essentially, as of this past July, we no longer require pre-application site visits. In lieu of those site visits, applicants are required to submit geotagged photos of their project area as part of their application submittal. Also, pretty much it's my job to help potential applicants submit the most competitive grant application possible. I generally will give an applicant an idea of how competitive I think their project may be based on, our past history. So you'll have an idea, a general idea of how competitive a project is even before the application. So this slide just shows kind of the 4 steps, and it's really helpful to determine project eligibility. If I have a conceptual plan or map, it doesn't need to be engineered design drawings or anything super detailed at the application phase, but it will help me with determining eligibility, particularly if it's maybe an atypical type of project. This is probably the most important slide in terms of looking at how we evaluate all applications we receive. The environmental benefits and environmental impacts are weighted the highest in our scoring criteria. Financial resources relate to the relative economic condition within the project area itself. If a project is in a disadvantaged or underserved community in a Tier 1 county, that project would receive the highest score in our financial resources category. Some of these other benefits are probably relatively obvious. Most projects are not located on or adjacent to state-owned properties such as a state park. But if your project happens to be, then you will get extra points for that as well. And I just want to go back and state that this information is embedded in the benefits and evaluation criteria of our application spreadsheet. So this is a summary of our application review and contracting timeframes. Right now, we are currently in our fall 2024 grant cycle, our application cycle, which ends December 31st. And we're going to be making review decisions for those next April. We're currently actually reviewing spring 2024 applications that were received, and we'll be making funding recommendations for those in a couple of weeks. I have a review team that I consult with that assist with recommending projects for funding, and they're comprised of 6 DWR, Division of Mitigation Service, and Division of Ag and Consumer Service colleagues. I realize that this slide has a lot of content and definitely too much to cover now. However, and I think Amanda alluded to this earlier, it is important. It's very important to be able to explain why resiliency projects are important, not just to potential funders, but also to elected officials, your own organizational leadership, and also to the general public. Being able to convey these non-environmental benefits of resiliency projects, such as the economic, public health, and social ones, which are shown in this red area that I just highlighted, can be more likely to get the attention of multiple stakeholders than just focusing on strictly environmental benefits. I usually refer to these benefits as community benefits, but they can also be looked at as building resiliency into the economic, environmental, and public health and social fabric of our communities. So the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on some of my favorite resiliency projects that span the mountains, Piedmont, and coastal plain ecoregions of our state. This first project, the Southside Community Stormwater Project, is the most holistic project we funded in terms of promoting economic, environmental, public health, and social resiliency, and I'll show you why. You can see the scope on the left. Basically, there were 6 stormwater control measures that were included, including disconnecting impervious surfaces that treat 28 acres of not just on-site, but off-site stormwater coming into this public housing complex in Asheville. You can see the goals of this project were to improve water quality, improve public safety, and add community aesthetics at this affordable housing community. And the resiliency outcomes were the sustainable treatment of off-site and on-site stormwater from this 28-acre watershed. I just highlighted on the conceptual plan the areas in green are where the bioretention areas were added. The blue areas are where something called the regenerative stormwater conveyance was placed, and the constructed wetland. I don't know if you can see my cursor right here. This is what is designed to treat all of the stormwater coming from this site. So just some pictures. These are some photos of a photo of the bioretention area in upper left, the constructed wetland on the right that is treating about 28 acres of drainage area. Some other photos on the left, there was a concrete ditch after the RSC, which stands for Regenerative Stormwater Conveyance, was put in. An RSC is similar to, it's kind of a combination of stream restoration and a bioswale for you stormwater people. They also, you see a photo of the concrete ditch, and then stream restoration was done in the downslope portion of the RSC. And then these are just some other photos. I do want to point out the photos on the left. So this project the beauty of this project is that it addressed stormwater and water quality issues, but it also fixed a public safety concern and incorporated other amenities that the residents of this housing complex wanted to see incorporated into the design of this project. So on the left, before the project, this area used to be a sheet of ice in the winter because of water just seeping into the parking lot. You can see that issue was addressed here. As part of the project, they also incorporated some benches, trash cans, and improved the walking trails in this complex. So I was going to play a video, but for the sake of time, I'm not. I'm going to move on to this project at the Hickory YMCA. I'll let you all just kind of look at the scope of this was to, you can read the scope, the goals, and the resiliency outcome. The success of this project, in my mind, is that it really opened up the benefits that can be the flood control benefits that can be realized through a relatively small urban stream restoration project. Essentially, before this project was done, the YMCA maintenance building right here would flood after a 2-inch rain. After this stream restoration project, the water stayed in the channel after a 6-inch rain. So significant flood control benefits. You can see the before and after pictures was a riprap channel before. Afterwards, you can see the vegetation, the plantings, the riprap was removed. This is a picture looking upstream at Cripple Creek, and you can see the dramatic difference between the before and after. So now we're moving to the coastal plain of the state, and I do want to mention that over the past years I've been managing this grant program, less than 20% of our grants are for projects in the coastal plain. And secondly, we've only funded 3 living shoreline projects. So I would like to see those numbers change. So please get the word out that there is funding available to make projects like this happen. So these are just some before and after pictures. I do want to note the red arrow shows a frame of reference for both of the pictures. On the left, you can see the significant shoreline erosion. This yellow area shows a 4-foot tall auger. So you can just see the significant amount of erosion that was occurring along this shoreline. And you can see afterwards how it's been stabilized with both rock, which they call granite sills, and then marsh vegetation that has helped to stabilize the shoreline. I do also want to point out there's an arrow, that yellow area shows a breach in this photo taken in March 2018 in this peninsula. You can see that same area, see how it's been stabilized. And this is essentially kind of the living portion of a living shoreline where it creates habitat as well as structural integrity for the shoreline. I know my time is drawing short, so I'm just going to briefly mention we also provide funding for feasibility studies. This was one sponsored by the Stormwater Master Plan by the City of Elizabeth City. You can see that basically the beauty of this is that this master plan identified and prioritized projects based on public input and cost. It also provided some specific locations of projects and potential nature-based stormwater solutions for it. So in closing, here's what our website looks like. I do want to draw your attention to the links that are in red that have our grant awards. You want to find out more about those. We also have related funding sources, additional resources, and story maps of our featured projects that will hopefully be updated in the next month or so to build off the work of a summer intern. So in closing, me and Kevin's contact information is at the top. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I look forward to hearing from upcoming speakers and further discussion during our question and answer session. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amin. Very informative. And I'm encouraging folks to reach out to the division and the department and have conversations around projects, availabilities. As you noted, some of their timelines are a little different than everybody else. So go to the website. My colleague, Nicole Gutter, to just put the link in the chat. So please make sure you follow up and find out and ask more questions. I'm going to put you over to talk to who I refer to in the start as Mr. Brick. Kane Riggin has led the Brick program since it started in 2019. He also serves as a grant panelist for the U.S. Departments of Labor, Education, Agriculture, as well as various state and foundation programs. If you want to know about what's been happening in this regard in the state, this is the person to speak to. Before I hand it over to Kane, I just wanted to say, Kane, please share with folks how successful the North Carolina BRIC program has been relative to other states. We have done a fantastic job in helping folks do applications, improve applications before they go in and so on. So Kane, please do share the success with everyone. Kane, all
Thank you,
yours.
Brian. I appreciate that. Of course, I'm going to brag. That'll be a part of my presentation. That's slide number 5. But anyway, I wanted to just give you a real quick 10-minute briefing of this program, actually two, our flood mitigation assistance program and also our BRIC that Brian was telling you about. And, you know, one of the reasons why I want to start with the flood mitigation assistance program is that one is based on the National Flood Insurance Program and the repetitive loss properties that we have across the state. In fact, I see that a couple members that are joining us today are the folks that are working in a grant-funded position to help homeowners apply for these grant opportunities. What you're seeing there is a part of that grant application that I put together. We won $1 million from FEMA in the 2022 round to put 4 directors in each of those coastal COGs, well, one person in each of those 4 coastal COGs to help homeowners because this program is undersubscribed. There's more money available in the program than what has been awarded each year. And what we are finding in North Carolina is what you're seeing there is that the locals will put in an LOI and we say, okay, great, we're glad that you have this many homeowners that are interested in taking advantage of the opportunity. But then when it gets to the time of the full application, we were falling short, mostly because of capacity at the local level. I mean, you got to go door to door to explain to these homeowners what their cost share is, if there is one, and what the benefits are. What's it gonna be like for you to elevate your property above the flood elevation? And so that's what these folks that are housed at the COGs are there to do, is to interface with the local governments. So if you're joining us from a local government and you're in one of those coastal COG communities, I'm going to share with you those 4 contacts. Right now, those people are really just in the phase 1 and phase 2 of this slide that I'm showing you and running aground on some of the obtaining local government nods. In other words, getting the local council to understand, hey, we want to reach out to these homeowners to let them know that this opportunity is available for the federal government to pay to mitigate the flood risk on their home. And some of them are hemming and hawing on that, which is a little heartbreaking, but that's what we're facing. So just know that that COG person is just reaching out to the homeowner to gain a buy-in from them to make sure that they would like to participate. We'll then come back to you and give you the full nod opportunity. I mean, you are the applicant. So we're going to come back to you and make sure that you're okay with these homes, A, B, C, and D, being elevated. So we want to get as much participation in this as we possibly can. There is no cost for this program. These are residential elevations and acquisitions to the local government. Unless the local government decides to help out the homeowner, those costs are homeowner costs as far as the cost share. And it is a reimbursement program. And it's important for you to know that there's income off of this, a 5% project management cost. You know, so if you're talking $200,000 to $325,000 per home, there's quite a bit of money available at the local level in management costs for you to either continue to work with the COG to manage these projects all the way through to completion, or to do that at the local level. So that is very important for you to know. Let's see. The cost share is there's no cost to the local governments if there is a severe repetitive loss situation. It's 10% for repetitive loss and 25% if they're just NFIP insured but have not had significant losses. So I'm going to zoom on past this, but basically we're encouraging the local communities to take advantage of those people that are available to you at the COGS. Do a screenshot of this one. These are those 4 people that are funded 100% by FEMA under this grant to help these homeowners put these applications in. And then we move on to the Building Resilience in Communities program. This is that slide we were joking about. We have won more projects than any other state in the first 4 years of the program. We're excited about that. We started off with about $28 million in the first year of the program. 58, doubling that in 2021. Then we had our best year in 2022. We submitted 36 applications and 22 of those were selected competitively for a little over $100 million in Fed share. So 2023, this is just a slide that shows you here the types of projects that we were able to get funded in 2022. If you have any questions about whether your project would be competitive, please reach out to us. We're very, very responsive. You're going to find that this state section happens to survive on the management costs that come in. We're not funded by the state. So you're dealing with a whole team of folks that in essence work on a commission, not personally, but as an organization. So we're going to be very responsive. We're going to be very helpful to helping you get these applications across the finish line because it matters to us, not just programmatically, but towards our bottom line. BRIC 2023, let's see, this was 8 competitive projects. And so you've got to ask yourself, if we submitted the same amount of projects, why did we only win $32 million with 8 competitive projects? That was still more projects than any other state. But I'm just going to point you to the governor's website. The governor gives an explanation of why this is a politically charged situation. So I'm not going to get into any left and right here, but I do want to share with you that what you'll find is this map from FEMA that shows we're the only one not in dark green there. And that comes from the code adoption, which is one of the priorities of the BRIC program. So do a little bit of research on HB 488 there and what happened. This past year, we won $33 million, as I was telling you, 8 competitive projects. But look at the other states and the numbers that they won. They may have won less projects, but they're definitely winning larger projects. And all of those states in that top 8 that you're looking at are dark green on that map. So it does seem to affect us, that code adoption, but we can only assume. The available funding, if someone calls and asks me, do you think we're going to compete? Is our project good enough? I would say it's worth the effort to get a grant application in, get it developed, because we're able to use that fully developed grant application for other funding opportunities. Even if you don't win, you do get some important feedback from FEMA that's going to be helpful to you in future rounds. But here I'm showing you that $65 million we were able to fund with our disaster 4487. They were all BRIC infrastructure projects that had not been selected in 2021. I know Casey was mentioning earlier that Golden Leaf is not open to applications right now, but we have seen some success in their funding projects that were originally developed for BRIC and for whatever reason didn't go through. There's also a $25 million Disaster Relief Mitigation Fund, DRMF, if you Google that. I'm expecting there's going to be about the same amount of money this year. I think that that is a state fund that comes directly from the state budget. And even if that is not in the state allocation this year in the state budget, I think there's enough money of unused funds in past years that they can still offer $25 million. At least that's what I'm hearing. So that can be for cost overruns, helping you with the match for federal grants. I can talk to you about that and get you in touch with the right person. BRIC is trying to incentivize natural hazard risk from some sort of or to some sort of public infrastructure, and they want to get 40% of that money into disadvantaged communities. What does it mean to be a disadvantaged community? I'm only going to point you to a new tool that exists. I see this tool come up in grant applications, not only for FEMA, but for the Department of Labor and Agriculture. That is the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. Do a little screenshot here. That is a wonderful grant writing tool. You put in your zip code of the affected area, and it's going to give you gobs and gobs of useful information, screenshots that you can use in your application to prove some sort of disadvantaged criteria for your community, if that does exist. They are trying to incorporate nature-based solutions into these, and we've got some resources that can help you to determine and add nature-based solutions and maximize the points that are available for that. They do want to enhance climate resilience and adaptation, which of course we're going to find with all of the coastal projects, among others. And then that fourth bullet is what I was telling you about. They want to increase the funding to applicants that facilitate the adoption and enforcement of the latest public editions of the building code, IBC, IRC. We are at the 2015 code adoption. We would have adopted the 2021 or 2018 and 2021, but there was a law that came out that first moved us to a 6-year, these are things you should know about, a 6-year code adoption, which meant we weren't going to adopt a new one until 2024. And then HB 488 came out and blocked that 2024 adoption. So it looks like we're not going to have a new code adoption until 2031 unless something is done about that situation. So who is eligible to apply? The sub-applicant applies to the state, and the state applies to FEMA. And they're looking for shovel-ready projects, C&CB activities, which is capability and capacity building projects, or a combination of the two. We can complete your studies, complete your design as phase 1, and do the construction as phase 2. And we've almost 7 of the 8 projects last year that we had selected competitively were phased projects. So that's important for you to know. $500 million a project is the cap here, with about a $200,000 on the C&CB, although we may be lifting that this year because what I'm hearing, the NOFO is not out yet, but I'm hearing from FEMA that they're going to allow C&CB activities to compete beyond our state allocation nationally. So that means we can probably lift our cap that we put on our C&CB activities in order to reach as much of the state as possible. Notice that EDRC that I put at the bottom. Let's talk about that. I can help you. I've got a full list of all of the, in fact, NCORE helped me put that list together, Amanda's team, to be able to target those EDRC, economically disadvantaged rural communities. Remember, only 40% is trying to reach disadvantaged communities. So that does not mean, I've heard consultants say, oh, you're Charlotte, you're never going to win BRIC because they're trying to reach disadvantaged communities. Well, what about the other 60%? So please do not be discouraged by the Justice 40 initiative. That is only 40% of the program. Let's get a grant going. What are we able to do with our capability and capacity building projects? I'm going to zoom through these slides, just showing you in the first 4 years of the program with our state allocation, those projects that we were able to fund. The cost share is important for you to know. That is basically a 75-25 split unless you are an economically disadvantaged rural community or a CDRS, a community disaster resilience zone. In fact, if you're one of those, we've got some additional resources available for you to help put grant applications together. So we can talk to you about that. Reach out to us if you, and I can also help you identify whether your project is in a CDRS track. This is another example of how NCORE, for instance, and hazard mitigation are working hand in hand to maximize the benefits to you that are available through these grant-funded opportunities. Remember, it doesn't have to be 100% cash. That can also be in-kind contributions that you can quantify to help you come up with your local match, and we can talk to you about that. So this grant timeline, you'll notice we were talking about webinars coming out yesterday. It didn't happen because there is an immediate needs funding memo in place, an INF, FEMA likes to call it, which appears to be some sort of budgetary strategy that FEMA has done for the last few years, which says we only have the money left to fund our immediate needs. And so these programs like this are on hold. Last year, it put it on hold about 6 weeks. This year, it's looking like it might be 8 to 10. So, but anyway, we're not going to release a notice of funding opportunity at the state until we get that national notice of funding opportunity. So everything's kind of on hold. That October the 4th LOI deadline that you're looking at is most likely going to be extended, depending on when we get that notice of funding opportunity. So do keep those things in mind. This is what a application is going to look like. Remember, I said we work with you to get that application together. We've designed this to directly correlate with the qualitative scoring criteria. So we help you develop attachments that are aimed at maximizing the points that are available, particularly since we're losing so many points because of the code adoption. And there's a lot of resources available on our website, including winning grant applications from the first 4 years of the program and the all-important BCA, the benefit cost analysis. That is the toughest part of the application, in my opinion, although the person that's going to talk to you next, Travis Klondike, has been probably one of the most winning people, not probably, one of the most winning guys in the state in putting a BCA together that gets funded. So we do share past winning BCAs with you to help you have a leg up in making sure that you're not getting your project booted because of deficiencies in the benefit cost analysis. So that's my boss there, Steve McGugan. You can reach out to either one of the two of us if you have questions. We've got another thing coming up. I don't know if I'll be still on for the Q&A or if my supervisor Jason will jump on, but if not, please email us. Like I say, I'm always responsive. Call us. We'll have a meeting with your council. We'll answer any questions that you have to help you get an application together. The feedback that comes from a losing application will help you to win in a second round of funding. That's very important for you to know. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Kane. Thank you indeed. I just wanted to reiterate for folks that you see how much success we've had, and there's still money available. There's still money available. Please work with Kane and the team to get your applications in. I have worked on some of these, and the two-step process that we have as a part of the state, where you send in the application, there's review and recommendations, and sent back to you to improve, has worked wonders for the state. And talking about working wonders, CDDL, they have been extremely successful in getting projects funded. They've won awards for work done in the state. They won awards at the national level, at the international level. So I'm going to ask Travis to cue up his slides and get ready to talk about what has been done by CDDL. They worked in partnership with NCORE on a lot of projects, and I'm sure he's going to share some of that with you. Travis is a research professor at the Department of Landscape and Architecture and Environmental Planning at NC State. His work focuses on helping communities better adapt to natural hazards and climate change by leveraging contemporary methods of geospatial analysis, public engagement, visual narration, and grant writing as catalysts for public good. They have been very successful in getting funding for the project concepts they've developed. So Travis, all yours.
Thank you, Brian. Can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for inviting me to present today. I was asked to share some slides about community experiences and our experiences working with communities, specifically around grant applications. As Brian mentioned, I serve as the Associate Director of the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab at NC State University. I'm also a licensed landscape architect and teach in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning. This presentation is broken up into two halves, as you'll see in this agenda. The first part of the presentation will provide a bit of background context about the Coastal Dynamics Design Lab, or CDDL for short. I'm going to share some slides that are more specific to the Pollocksville Floodprint family of projects and grant applications and grant-funded projects that have been awarded to fund those efforts. And then lastly, focusing a bit more on lessons learned and recommendations recommendations and kind of couching those lessons learned and recommendations on 3 different phases of thinking about planning and grant writing and construction and phases of projects, recognizing that these are recommendations and lessons learned are all focused around grant supported activities. So a little bit about the CDDL. We are currently a team of 6. We all work at NC State in Raleigh. We're all landscape architects and environmental planners by trade, and our mission is to assist communities recover from floods, plan for more resilient and prosperous futures, and celebrate the natural and cultural resources that make each place special. An important note for us that I'll just mention up top is that 5 of the 6 staff in the Coastal Lab are soft funded, which means that in the academic sense of things, we are entirely reliant on grants to sustain our own salaries. So like many of the proposed projects in the communities we serve, we are relying on external funds to support our own time and our own efforts working with communities. So, we are acutely aware of the finite financial constraints that a lot of our community partners face when trying to implement resilience building projects. How we work with communities can be graphically represented something like this. We tend to position ourselves as designers and planners as being in between community needs and potential projects. We partner with local advocates and technical specialists in order to scope and develop projects that are strategically aligned with grant priorities and requirements to make the projects most competitive as possible. And what this looks like in practice for us, again, is more or less an entire ecosystem centered around grants. We apply for and when successful, are able to work with communities in the planning capacity at no cost to them. So we're able to offer our time at no draw from the bottom line of our community partner funds. But also through grants, we're also able to help fund built projects, tangible built projects in communities that are, again, not reliant on local funding restrictions. There are 3 prerequisites that I'll kind of walk through that are important for us to abide by in our work, and these are things that we stand by and how we work. But recognizing there's also a lot of local leadership representation on this call, we feel like these are things that consultants and private sector partners should have in mind when working with community partners and developing projects similar to what I'll share in Pollocksville. So 1, a prerequisite is a fit. We believe in committing to filling service gaps, and that holistic solutions require scales of focus that have historically been absent in small and rural communities, which we tend to work in. Number 2, of time. So moving up the timeline of engagement and working with consultants and community members to allow for the co-definition of issues, opportunities, and potential solutions. And then 3, establishing financial firewalls that protect community resources by having designers, planners, and hired consultants play an active role in helping identify and securing external sources of project financing. This burden should not fall entirely on local leadership and elected officials in order to find these resources. Consultants are able and many are very successful in helping attract these resources to projects. So again, graphically, this first prerequisite of fit, generally speaking, in the hazard mitigation world, there's this kind of deficiency of projects at like the city and townscape scale. There's a lot of projects that can happen at the parcel or building scale. So think of like buying out a single property or elevating a single house. And then also at the county or watershed scale. So think of these like hazard mitigation plans that are required to be compliant with FEMA regulations. But what's missing in a lot of the small and underserved communities where we tend to work are things that look at like a business district or a neighborhood or a stream. Things that can be at a bite-size project scale that are greater than an individual house, but smaller than a whole county plan study of things. And then time. If you think about the kind of typical relationship between a city and town or a designer and planner, generally speaking, that relationship is established through the release of RFQ or RFP for services in which there's a single community need and project identified for the designer or planner to respond to. But by moving up the timeline of engagement, the city and town can work together with the designer and planner to identify multiple community needs, scope multiple projects, and work together over a longer time horizon to see these projects through to the finish line. And then last, with the money prerequisite, we strongly believe that, again, it's not the sole burden of our local partner communities to finance projects. There are external grants available to help with these costs. And so being transparent about that upfront with consultants is important, but also recognizing that consultants can provide the service too is important. In the way that we work, there's a mutual interest in cities and towns going after grants and us helping them go after grants, and then seeing those projects through. There's mutual interest there for us to help cities and towns, and grantors want to support those efforts as well. So I'll walk through some of the projects in the Pollocksville floodprint to kind of show how these prerequisites go into action. For a little bit of community context for those not familiar with Pollocksville, Pollocksville is a community of about 300 people in Jones County, surrounded by agricultural lands and bordered by the Trent River. In Pollocksville and in Jones County more broadly, there are a lot of structures that are in the special flood hazard area and also lack insurance, and so there's a high level of vulnerability to flood. And so when events like Hurricane Florence happen, it creates a significant strain on the community and really draws into question the long-term viability of commercial districts, entire neighborhood and blocks of the community, to recover and successfully become more resilient following floods of this scale. And then further creating a barrier to recovery is that Pollocksville exists in a number of counties in the state that both have very low population density and very low county level capital expenditures to build infrastructure projects. So all these counties highlighted in pink here are ones that, because of low population density and of low capital outlays to fund projects, there's a really high level of unmet financial need to build resilience building projects in these communities. And so these are the ones that, if hit by natural disaster, have the hardest time self-funding projects to build back more resilient. So the Pollocksville Floodprint Plan, again, is a type of, is in a scale of project that connects into existing initiatives, but also, again, it's existing at the neighborhood and townscape scale of focus that I mentioned earlier. We're not looking at the entire county. We're not looking at just an individual parcel. It's something that's a bit more in between, and it's of one that can be cut up and divided into multiple projects that I'll walk through here shortly. So again, this is the entire plan, but it's broken up into 4 different phases. So project 1 was construct a wetlands and a boardwalk at the Riverfront Park, where the town hall used to be. The town hall was since relocated and then created a vacant lot at the Riverfront Park site. Project 2 is a complete street for Main Street, so helping with nuisance flooding along Main Street, but also recognizing the economic development potential that would provide. Project 3, FEMA allowable uses of properties that were in a declared buyout zone. And then Project 4, the elevation and floodproofing of commercial properties along Main Street. These are all guided by community input throughout the process. And the way in which we delivered the technical report at the end is that it was a series of cut and paste products that were strategically generated to align with grant programs that were targeted during the Pollocksville floodprint planning process. And so you could literally cut and paste certain paragraphs or certain pages from the report and directly apply them to grant programs. So I'm working with town leadership. It really cuts down on the time and effort to submit competitive projects to external grant programs. But all this takes a really long time to manifest and to implement. So this is what's shown here is about a 3-year timeline just from the start of the floodprint project to the end of last year. And what this graphic is showing is, in gray on the left, when we were engaged in a 12-month planning exercise. But then what you'll notice shortly after that is in pink, a series of grant applications are able to be submitted to right around the time of plan adoption. And again, because we provided a cut and paste product, it enables the town to move quickly to secure grant funds to support the projects being adopted by the community. You can see here in darker pink when certain grant awards were made, and then in teal when we started helping the town with releasing RFQs and RFPs for design and construction services to realize these build projects. An important thing that I'll point out, just again, specific to grants and community resources, the town of Pollocksville did commit $20,000 to this effort. However, again, we used the North Carolina Community Foundation grant to support our time during the planning process. And when the town did commit $20,000, it came at a time where it could be up leveraged to a degree, in essence, 20x of their investment, because we've been able to help fundraise over $2 million to this community. So, again, we've recently completed the installation of phase 1, the constructed wetlands and boardwalk at Riverfront Park. We recently completed phase 1 of Main Street improvements, and phase 2 is actually about to kick off next week. And then the last phase of the project, the elevation and floodproofing of commercial properties along Main Street, we recently received the FEMA BRIC grant agreement from NCEM and are moving forward with the RFQ and design and permitting process of this project right now. We've been able to repeat this process communities across the state through assistance provided to us from NCORE to help with planning and grant writing services to some of these community partners. And again, this is what's shown here is a list of the different grants that we have helped communities apply to directly related to the floodplain projects being proposed in each. So in Lumberton, Princeville, and Pollocksville, these were largely supported by the North Carolina Community Foundation as proof of concept communities that we have continued to work with up to present day in many cases. And then starting in 2023 with Whiteville, we're able to move through a series of current and upcoming floodplain exercises with additional communities. So today we've helped raise over $28 million of external investments into communities at no direct cost to them. But that also have resulted in a 20x ROI on investments of grantor investments into us at the Coastal Lab. But what's most significant here is, again, the other investments being made that are tangential to our work in Pollocksville. So in this case, investments that private property owners are making that are adjacent to our efforts, that are being leveraged by our scope of work, but are separate from what we are helping the town implement. I have a series of slides that I think I'm going to run short on time of sharing today. I'll quickly go through them just at a high level, just so we can kind of touch on them quickly. Some recommendations for pre-planning, planning, grant writing, and construction. So for pre-planning, being mindful of scoping. So I know it can be a barrier to entry to not have a long-term plan in place at the beginning, but longitudinal investments made during the planning and grant writing phase lays the groundwork for more meaningful responses to community needs, and then yielding a higher rate of tangible built outcomes. I'm going to skip down a few slides. And then second, scaling, being mindful of an approach that can nest smaller projects within larger holistic vision, as this offers more opportunities for diverse and financially nimble and shovel-ready projects to move forward while longer-term efforts can develop in parallel. And then lastly, with implementing, again, having partners that are connected to the planning and grant writing phase is helpful in that if they're able to stay connected to projects, they can help shepherd the implementation of grants through construction and implementation while ensuring that the original intent of projects is upheld and that emergent needs can be thoughtfully responded to. So with that, I'll end this presentation, but more than happy to speak to any lessons learned or recommendations in detail during the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Travis, for sharing with us the work of CDDL. It's been very successful. I have worked myself with or had conversations with the mayor of Pollocksville, and he only has good things to say about this group and the process and the amount of money it has brought for the town and solving some of the climate resilience issues that they have, particularly around flooding. So we are going to move into the question and answer phase. Just a reminder, please, if you're interested in asking a question, raise your digital hand, as Nicole is indicating, or you may put it in the chat and we'll monitor that. While you get your questions ready, I have a kickoff question for the panel. And I won't put anybody on the spot who wants to take it first, but I'll just lob it out to all of you. Where do people get tripped up the most in their application processes for the funding opportunities? So which person on the panel wants to take a first go at that as the webinar attendees get their questions ready?
I'm more than happy to jump in.
Sure.
Kane mentioned this earlier, but the benefit cost analysis and things similar to benefit cost analysis are required with many federal grants in particular. Where we tend to see problems is with projects that are scoped and developed without being mindful of benefit cost analysis on the front end. And so projects are fully designed, engineered, conceived with cost estimates, and then the decision is made to develop a grant application. Well, then the project may not pass the benefit cost analysis test at the end. So if you know on the front end that you will need to generate a benefit cost analysis, you can do a push and pull on the project scope early on to increase or decrease the cost, increase or decrease the scope, working with an engineer or an architect, so that you can ensure and be confident in the BCA passing down the road when you apply to a grant. So
Okay.
being mindful of that early is what I'd recommend in general.
Okay, so Travis, just to follow up on the point there, a lot of folks don't know where to do or to get BCAs done. How do they get them done? What are they? Which ones stand up to which level of scrutiny and so on? So where can they go for help in this regard? What set of skills do they need or they need to hire?
Yeah, so for what I'll call more standardized mitigation projects, so like some of the ones that Kane pointed to, like an elevation of a building or acquisition of a property via buyout, there are some standard practices in place where there's just a set dollar amount to elevate a building or a set dollar amount to acquire property. Those can be done at the local level if there's level of patience to sit through a FEMA application. But for more complex projects like nature-based infrastructure in particular, those definitely require input from a landscape architect or a civil engineer. If you're elevating mini buildings, I would say an architect. So there's definitely private sector or nonprofit partnerships that can be had to help develop those. But once you start, getting into the nature-based projects, that's when you really need to look probably outside of what resources you have locally to help shepherd those through.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else on the panel wants to talk about what trips up applicants as they go after funding?
Where we look for funding frequency, we ask for documentation that supports the frequency of the flooding in that location. It can be pictures, police reports, insurance reports, other evidence from homeowners, photos of the events. And so what we find is that folks get tripped up on that. They have photos from different locations, or they don't have that information available. And what we have encouraged them to do is talk to neighbors, talk to folks in the community, because a lot of times folks will have pictures of the flooding in their neighborhood. It's just that no one had asked them before. So when we look at how to measure frequency and think about how to document the proof of it, finding that historical information is something that has tripped folks up in the past.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think at a very basic level, both with the grant program I manage and just seeing it in other places, a lot of people get tripped up on simply not following the directions on the application form or the grant program guidelines. And secondly, being clear in terms of how the proposed project ties into the specific grant program criteria.
Okay. I wanted to support that too. In some of the application reviews that I've been a part of, it says fill out this section using the following criteria, and folks just leave them blank or say see section 2.2 where this was already discussed. I want to encourage folks to fill those in. Remember that you're often, especially when you're doing national applications, you're competing against everybody in the country, and the readers are going to move on very quickly if they don't see the information that they requested of you. Anybody else wants to add anything? And Nicole, I'm not seeing any hands. Are there any questions in the chat?
We don't yet have any unaddressed questions in the chat. I think one question I think from Alicia earlier, and Travis, you responded to have her reach out, but perhaps you'd want to address more generally how communities get connected with and work with CDDL.
Sure. So again, we operate under a premise that we will not receive funds from local units of government to do our work. So the ability for us to work at no direct cost to communities is something that we abide by strongly. Currently we have this significant funding from NCORE for us to work in select counties, in predominantly the eastern part of the state. These are counties that were most impacted and distressed by Hurricanes Matthew and Florence, but also Tropical Storm Fred in the western part of the state. And so, if you are a community generally, I'd say in the eastern third of the state, we do have some capacity right now to be able to offer assistance over the next year or two. Again, at no direct cost, so please reach out if that applies to you on this call. And then kind of absent of our current NCORE funding, we traditionally work with either state level grants or foundation level grants for us to, again, be able to provide that same level of service to community partners. We tend to kind of flex up or flex down the scope of service, again, based on funding levels that are available and also what the needs may be in a community. But again, it's all kind of tied toward the reality of grant funds likely being required to implement projects after the planning phase. In more robust projects, we'll include hydraulic modeling and benefit cost analysis and professional opinions of probable cost and schematic design and community outreach and engagement. We'll include all of these as part of the scope of work we can provide, and recognizing that makes the projects most competitive down the road for implementation. But again, please reach out if there is interest, even if you're not in the kind of eastern third of the state. Again, we're more happy to work with you to identify resources so that we can work together.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. I see some conversation going on in the chat around flood frequency for Golden Leaf. Casey or team, can you share that, a little bit of that with everybody else?
Sure. Where we are looking at flooding frequency, it is the number of actual instances that can be documented. So we are aware of the 500, 100-year, those kinds of, when we're sizing the appropriateness of a response. But we want to, our board is interested in solving flooding that has actually happened. So again, not a likelihood of flooding, not risk of flooding, but truly this is an area that floods. It floods all the time. This is how we know it floods all the time. And this is a solution that will reduce that frequent flooding.
Okay, thanks. Another question for the panel in general. What are some of the untapped opportunities you have in your programs that applicants aren't taking advantage of? What do you wish you had more applications for? I think, Casey, you touched a little bit of that in your applications, or was it Kane? I may have gotten that mistaken, but what are untapped opportunities that folks aren't taking advantage of, and what do you want to hear from them? And that's for anybody to take on.
I alluded to it in my presentation, Brian, about the fact that as far as the eastern part of the state is severely underrepresented in terms of number of applications we receive. A couple of years ago, I crunched some numbers, and it was like 13% of our applications are from the eastern part of the state. So we'd like to see more applications from the eastern part of the state, particularly relating to, projects like living shorelines would be very competitive for our funding. Other bioengineered or nature-based projects, they don't have to be strictly that, but those projects tend to be more competitive for our funding because they provide greater environmental benefits, which is weighted, the factor that's weighted the highest in our scoring criteria.
Okay. It's good to hear of the available opportunities. Anything else from anyone in that same regard?
Yeah, I might jump in here as well. Kane mentioned this quickly in his presentation, but the C and CB opportunity through FEMA, that is specifically for planning, design, project scoping, engineering, grant writing, et cetera. In the past, the state has been very successful in awarding a high number of applicants that put forth the effort to apply. It's particularly for small, under-resourced communities. These can be at high dollar amounts that wouldn't otherwise be made available with local funds as a standalone. So I would encourage folks, particularly if funds are tight, to look at the C and CB offshoot of FEMA BRIC in particular, and that this could be a really valuable resource for procuring a high-quality level planning exercise.
Yep, I support that wholeheartedly, Travis. If we're going to make decisions, do projects about to address particular issues, understanding what they are is a critical step, and there are lots of funding agencies that don't give funding for that step. So C and CB is an important one to go after for planning and understanding your problems wholeheartedly as you make decisions and get to construction or shovel-ready projects. So I support that myself. Anything else anyone wants to add? We have a few minutes left, so I do have another question, but are there any questions from the audience? All right, as I don't see any hands or any clamoring for responses, I wanted to ask the panel in general to share a little bit about what do you think the funding landscape looks like in the next 4 to 5 years for projects of this nature related to resilience in the state, federally, at the local level, from philanthropic organizations. Let's hear what you hear in your offices and what's coming down the pipeline to share with the wider public.
I can jump in. So Golden Leaf, the flood mitigation program, was the result of a lot of advocacy work from folks in the communities and the American Flood Coalition, others working to put more of a legislative effort in North Carolina on resilience. And so that's how the flood mitigation program came to us. In the past, our disaster recovery funding had all been following major disasters. So I do think there is a significant interest in more resilience funding at the state level. I do think with the looming and always uncertain budget times, it's hard to know how that wave will continue to roll. But I also do think the successful implementation of projects and being able to show and tell stories of communities that previously were subject to flooding, implementing these solutions, and then being able to tell the stories of success following that is going to be really key to increasing the interest, at least at the state level, in continuing
Okay, thank you. Anybody else has anything to add for the future of dollars coming our way for this type of work?
I just make a kind of quick observation. So whenever there's a federal disaster declaration in a county, like following Hurricane Matthew or Tropical Storm Fred, whatever it may be, that makes eligible impacted property owners for mitigation funds. So, in many cases, that might be an opportunity for folks to either elevate or relocate following an event. What I've observed in a number of communities is that folks that miss those windows of opportunity to take advantage of those elevation or relocation assistance funds or that there's just not local capacity ready to move forward with doing the door knocking door to door in order to like adequately serve impacted residents. So just in many cases, these disaster declarations are happening every year, every 2 years in a lot of counties. And so I guess my recommendation is just being aware of locations in one's home community that are most vulnerable and being regularly impacted by flood events, and having some way of having discourse with those property owners about what opportunities may be available when the next round of eligibility comes through. Again, time and time again, we see lots of frustrated and disappointed property owners that felt like they would have done an action but weren't aware of the opportunities that existed. So having open dialogue with the most vulnerable and impacted members of one communities about these programs in advance of even the events happening themselves, something I'd in general recommend.
Okay, all right, thank you. And thank you to everyone that participated and shared their information today. There are a couple of things I'd like to just share with you before we hop off and go to our next meetings. We have additional funding opportunities, additional grant webinars coming up. We have one on September 30th, grant writing and grant assistance. We also have a following webinar that will come on January 27th of next year, talking about green infrastructure and nature-based solutions. We want to also point you to the resource of the Resilience Exchange. It's resilienceexchange.nc.gov, and I asked Nicole to drop that in the chat for everybody to see. It's our recently developed resource where you can find all things climate resilience, including funding opportunities and methods and who to work with. So please do share that. We will certainly share the speaker contacts for those who want to reach out. A big and massive thank you again to the presenters and panelists, and also to my colleague Nicole Goddard, our Outreach and Engagement Manager, who put this all together and made it work so seamlessly. I was just the face for you guys today. She has done all the work to make this possible, and she's organizing the upcoming events. I want to share one more screen with you, and hopefully it goes through before you disappear. My computer says it's trying to share about the Resilience newsletter, an opportunity to, well, it won't allow me to share, but it's our Resilience newsletter where you can sign up for a monthly newsletter to hear stuff that's going on in the field of resilience, around what's happening at NCORE and across the state, and even some information that's relative to North Carolina, but from outside our boundaries. So again, everyone, thank you for attending. This has been great. Please share this information. We'll make this available to you as we go forward. So thanks again, and see you soon.